My name is Escada Horton. I am 17 years old. I go to Mount Tabor High School. I'm in the 12th grade, and I go to New Bethel Baptist Church. So my topic I chose to pursue was how three separate events in the 1960s and 1970s impact the overall civil rights movement. I see America through the eyes of a victim. I don't see any American dream. I see an American nightmare. This was said by Malcolm X in April on 1964. The civil rights movement was a major time for the African American population in the 1960s and 70s. There were struggles and obstacles that many had to face to get to where they are now. There were silent and peaceful sit-ins that resulted in violence and chaos. The March to Washington, D.C. played a major role in gaining supporters for the civil rights movement, and the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. was a heavy blow to the movement, but it still made way for a stronger movement. So think of the civil rights movement as a road. It goes a long, twisting and winding road, some straightaways, some bumpy curves where boulders, rocks, and potholes are in the way. Think of those potholes as obstacles, such as violence and chaos, brutality, killings. And think of our straightaways were smooth, flat surfaces. Those are the major points of progress. So sometimes you have your sharp rights. Sometimes you have your slow and winding curves to the left. Sometimes you make circles so big, circles so fast and so big that it makes your head spin. So on the right side of our road, we have a typical American family, an American house. Beautiful, big, giant house where it's a beautiful two-story house, bright white picket fence, two children, playing in the yard, playing kickball, throwing the ball back and forth at each other, while the little tiny Chihuahua dog is a tiny dog is playing in the garden, where there are beautiful tulips, roses, and any kind of flower you can imagine, while the mother's inside cooking and cleaning, and the father's at work coming home soon for a family dinner. And on the left, you have a one-story house built for two people, but there's 4 people living in it. Mother's always tired, always working. When she gets home, she cooks and then cleans, and she goes straight to bed. Children are playing in the yard. They're really sometimes hungry. Well, they have no dog. But the father's always working, so you barely never see him, and he hardly comes home for dinner. So which do you think you're sat on? I'll give you a hint. The left, there's the black family before the civil rights movement. And on the right, you have the typical white American family. So, starting down our road, it was the Greensboro sit-ins. This was probably one of the smoother straightaways of our road. Greensboro sit-ins were the start of something great. It sparked the civil rights movement. Sit-ins were not a new technique in the civil rights movement, but they energized and brought a new light to the movement. The sit-in started on February 1st, 1960. The first sit-in was in Greensboro at Woolworth Diner at an all-white counter. 4 brave students from A&T University sat down and refused to leave until they were served. They sat all night in peaceful protest until closing. The 4 brave students were Ezekiel A. Blair Jr., Franklin E. McCain, Joseph A. McNeil, and David L. Richmond. The diner was soon filled with brave, determined African-American students who were determined to change the future for blacks. The diner soon became so crowded they could not tend to their white customers. By July 25th, Woolworth Diner finally gives in and decides to desegregate the lunch counter. This act of courage started a domino effect. People and students all over the nation choose to join the cause. Diners, restaurants, and chain stores all across the U.S. had mass sit-ins. On October 19th, Martin Luther King Jr. joins the sit-in at an all-white restaurant in Atlanta department store Riches. He was arrested along with 51 other protesters for the charge of trespassing and driving without a valid license. He spent 4 months in prison until Robert Kennedy, the Attorney General at the time, convinces the judge to let him out on bail. These acts of courage, determination of many protesters, and because of Kennedy's act of kindness, causes African American citizens to support the Democratic Party. So if we're going down our road, and on the right, you see Woolworth's Diner. It's full of hard-working, studying college students who are just sitting there peacefully doing their homework, while whites surround them, yelling at them, cursing at them, trying to get them to move so they can be served. So if you were in that diner, you were sitting down peacefully doing your work and someone was yelling at you, wouldn't you turn around and retaliate and tell them to go somewhere else? Wouldn't you retaliate and maybe hit them, start violence? But no, that's not what our 4 protesters did. They sat there peacefully, doing their homework, studying, and just sat there until closing because they were refused service. So still going down our road. On the March of Washington, D.C. on August 25th, 1963. It was a celebration of the 100th anniversary of the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation, which was signed on January 1st, 1863, by President Abraham Lincoln. The movement was originally set to march to the White House, but the officials said this would have a major backlash on the movement's progress. They made the decision to instead taking it to the White House, they would take it to the Lincoln Memorial. This major event was meant to bring light on the subject of social and political obstacles and the challenges that African Americans face across the country. This event was organized by many religious and civil groups. There was more than 20,000 whites and blacks who marched to the Lincoln Memorial, ready to hear the speeches against racism. Among these speeches was Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech, "I Have a Dream." This point in time became a key movement in the growing of the battle of civil rights across the United States. The climax to this march was Martin Luther King Jr.'s spirited and rousing speech that called for racial equality and justice. His speech was last to appear, but it was the most monumental. This phenomenal speech was aired live on most major TV stations. As he stated the name of Abraham Lincoln in his speech, he was given credit for assembling more supporters for the civil rights movement. So, from 1955 bus boycott, Martin Luther King Jr. was a natural-born leader from the start. He helped found the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, or the SCLC, in 1957 as he served as the first president. He was a major role model and spokesman for the civil rights movement. The day after his speech, "I've been to the mountaintop" in Memphis on April 4th, 1968, he was shot. His assassination led to a spread of anger through the African American population. In protest to this major catastrophe, 198 riots broke out. There was no regret for the white America, and along with the anger and mourning, which in turn helped speed up the road to the Equal Housing Bill. This housing bill would be the first major legislative achievement in the civil rights era. His death was tragic, but his life, his work, and his sacrifices opens the door for more achievements and accomplishments. Being a Negro in America means trying to smile when you want to cry. It means trying to hold to physical life and psychological death. It means pain of watching your children grow up with clouds of inferiority in their mental skies. It means having their legs off and then being condemned for being a cripple. Where Do I Go From Here? 1967, Martin Luther King Jr. The sit-ins were just the beginning of the civil rights movement, but it was a big step in the right direction. The march to Washington, D.C. was a big success and gave the movement a giant push. But the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. was a minor step back, but his life's work opened the door for many opportunities for progress. The road to civil rights movement was bloodshed, pain, and hard work at every stop along the way, but much progress, and the walls between the blacks and the whites of America was broken down piece by piece. Close to the end of this long and winding road were accomplishments and acceptance, but there's still a long way ahead of us for full equality and respect. That's good.